Hey everyone, Minky here with, I guess the first episode of Minky's Mondays. That's what I'm going to call it for now until I figure out if I want to keep that name, or I'll probably keep it because I don't think it's the right name. And hopefully I'm hoping this series is like, kind of a series that can start off your week on a nice note, if you will, in some way, shape or form, if you will. Or at least it's something to look forward to at the beginning of the week to help keep you going or something. It's just a matter of we here on this video I'm just going to discuss topics and whatnot, the occasional topic or whatever. I might not do it every week because I might not have a topic every week, but I'm sure I'll figure something out hopefully on occasion. So and today I wanted to go over a few theories, or not theories, but Zelda Timeline theories and whatnot, just to kick things off, because this is kind of the first thing I wanted to talk about. Well, not the first thing, it's just something I wanted to talk about. This is also technically the first episode, the first proper episode of it. But before, yesterday actually it was released, but I did an April Fool's joke for one of my deck profiles, and technically that's the first episode. It's currently private at the minute, but I might release it again depending on if you want that released and whatnot. So if you do, I'll obviously release it, but I'll release it again, if you will. Not schedule it out again, just release it again, just keep it public or something. Because I figured I might keep it private for now, especially since I've renamed it, and I don't proper renamed it. I've not just added April Fool's to it, but I've proper renamed it to Minky's Mondays as opposed to deck profiles, because I don't want it to look. It looks a bit weird, and I'm a bit OCD about it. I want it to look proper, if you will. Plus, it was uploaded on a Monday, so it's supposed to be a Wednesday, so that's kind of why. But today, this first one, I wanted to go over a few timeline theories I've got, if you will, or not timeline theories, rather these timeline theories. I've got 3 here, technically 4. 3 of them are actually my own timeline theories from way back. I'm talking just over a decade ago. 2011 to 2013 kind of time. So Skyward Sword had just released not too long ago, and I'm just learning how to use not learning how to use Microsoft PowerPoint, but I'm kind of getting into the swing of it. If you will, I'm kind of enjoying it, if you will. I'm learning to use it and different kinds of things and whatnot. I had barely just started LPing back then, so it was all the way back when, and fortunately somehow I still have these 3 images, if you will, that I made of my own timeline theories. The first 3 are my own timeline theories, and the 4th one is the Hyrule Historia one. And I remember back then I did not like the what if scenario of it, if you will. I didn't like the idea that it was a what if scenario, because I felt I always wanted it to be a case of all of it was factual, if you will, if that makes sense. I always wanted it to be a string of events together, even if it is a branch timeline, it's still a string of events. I'm completely fine with not what if scenarios. What is it? I'm completely fine. I was completely fine with obviously branching timelines, because obviously different events take place and it's time travel and whatever. But I wasn't really fine with the whole what if scenario, because I feel like it's a bit too underwhelming. And one thing I do like about it, by the way, I'll show on screen now what my image is of it, because I wanted to make an image of the the Hyrule Historia one. I called it Shigeru Miyamoto one. I called it the Miyamoto's timeline, just because that's kind of all I knew what to call it at the time. But now I call it the Hyrule Historia timeline. I don't want to call it the official timeline, because technically, it is, but they've changed it a little bit since then. Not just because of new releases, but they've moved some of the old ones about as well. And on top of that, what else is that? I can't remember what I was going to say. But I figured it's something worth sharing anyway. I also used to call it Timeline with a capital L as well as a capital T for some reason. But Yeah, so I've got these three timelines. The first one was the one I believed the most, at least at the time anyway, and it was obviously because Ocarina of Time splitting into two different timelines. You had the normal Young Link versus Adult Link timeline split, so that's kind of expected. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So the Hyrule Historia one, something that a lot of people say about it is that it's kind of like the Triforce timeline, if you will, in the sense that in the Link failed timeline, Ganondorf wins. So that's Ganondorf's timeline. In the two where Link wins, because technically there is two that Link wins. In the adult timeline, that's where Zelda's left, and the future is in her hands. So that's the Zelda timeline. That's the Wisdom one. And then Young Link, the Young Link timeline, is when he's got the knowledge of the Adult Link timeline. So he goes back to Zelda and kind of changes history and whatnot. And that's the Young Link timeline, that's the Link timeline. So that's kind of an interesting thing, and I do like that idea. I do hope there's something like that going on. But I'll get back to that in a few moments, because I think there is something kind of interesting and something about Ocarina of Time that I want to go over. I just see what people think on it. But so this first timeline that I've got here is just like a normal. Bearing in mind, I haven't played all the Zelda games yet, so I don't know enough to put all of them in yet. So that's why some of them are missing, like the original two Zelda games, and I don't know what else is missing, but that's why a few of them are missing, basically. So, just bear that in mind as well. That's why they're not there. But so the first one is just a normal kind of run of the mill Ocarina of Time split timeline where it's just two splits, right? Now the second one, I'll go into that in a minute. But the third one is my linear timeline, which is just linear. It's just how things play out linearly, if you will. Like, I wanted to try and at least have a go at creating like a linear timeline, of having an idea of it. So this might be something. I don't know if that's something I want to, do or what, but it's something. So there you go. I don't know how much I want to believe in this, but it's certainly something, So, and then the second timeline. Now, the second timeline actually has Skyward Sword split as well, and I feel like that's kind of important in a way, because remember, this was a decade ago or so when I thought Skyward Sword might have split. And I remember seeing the occasional video or two where people were trying to think like, okay, maybe Skyward Sword splits several times because Zelda goes back and then Link goes back or whatever. And to be honest, I couldn't really put my finger on it, and I can't really do that now because I have been playing Skyward Sword as of late, but I've only just beaten the third dungeon, so I can't exactly say too much about where timeline shenanigans go there, because I know like a lot of the things is kind of like predestined. I know like old Impa says like it's predestined, things are predestined, so things are gonna happen, if you will. And you also see obviously the Zelda bracelet on her, as well as the amber relic in the bag at the beginning of the game when Zelda turns into a big amber relic, if you will. So you see that, so that's kind of hinting towards it, So but obviously it's timeline shenanigans, it's time travel, it's gonna mess things about, So obviously there's like, and there's also the bit about the Lanayru, the Thunder Dragon, about how he's like, he's just like, he's ill and dead, and then you go back in time and plant a tree, and then you come back in time or you go to the present again, and then Gru's just like, oh, there's a random tree that just spawned here, and then you take the berry of it and you give it to the Thunder Dragon and he survives or whatever, or something, and I'm just wondering, like, I wonder if there is something there, if you will. I wonder if there is something there, or with Zelda, or with you, because like, and then obviously like, I wonder if there's anything that actually causes a split, if you will. And then you've got the case of, like, at the end of the game, when Link wishes on the Triforce, he says like, oh, I wish for Demise's demise, you know, or whatever. He wishes for the imprisoned to be no more. And that's kind of like what sets in motion what happens next, if you will. And then Girahim pops up and he kidnaps Zelda and takes her back in time and revives Demise. And then you go back in time and kill Demise in the past with the Master Sword in the past. You set the Master Sword down in the past, and you come to the present. And so it's really weird because you don't see the Master Sword at all in Skyward Sword until you actually make it yourself, if you will. You know, you don't actually see it in the sealed temple, so it's a little weird. I remember as well seeing someone say like, the reason why the Impression is trying to go up all the way to the sealed temple is because the Master Sword is there. You know, the Master Sword with the sealed demise in it. Therefore, obviously, it wants to get to the Master Sword so that it can actually take its... So demise can take its soul out of it or something. You know what I mean? Something like that. I feel like there's some... there's something to that, if you will. Because why else is it going to the top? You know, why is it going to the sealed temple? You know, I guess if anything, it's just to kill Emperor or something. I don't know what the purpose is. I can't recall, because again, I haven't gone to that part of the game yet. I haven't had to fight him yet at all. It's just because, like, you don't fight him until at least, like, midway through the game, or at least in the second third of it, if you will. And like I said, I've only beaten the third dungeon, and I've not fought him yet, so I don't know exactly what he's coming up here for. You know, I don't know if Impa says anything or whatever. So I figured that's something worth pointing out, if you will, as the whole, you know, demise in the past and whatever, and you know, and maybe the Through, and then maybe the Zelda going back in time or something. I know on occasion people are like saying like Tears of the Kingdom, because it has the time travel stuff with Zelda and whatnot, and it's like you know, it's like they're saying like it's a repeated timeline or something, and it's like, and I'm thinking like, I haven't seen the whole thing for Tears of the Kingdom just yet, but maybe in this case, maybe you could apply this to every time travel instance, but then that kind of gets a bit messy, and it's like, you know. And then I know someone else, I watched a video where someone suggested that maybe Tears of the Kingdom and what's it called, Breath of the Wild take place. Like, I feel like everyone's neutral on saying, I feel like pretty much everyone's going to say Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild are the same link and whatever. I don't think anyone's going to be arguing that, other than, you know, maybe the people who think it's just a legend, if you will. That's really the only case where I think people disagree, but that's obviously their opinion, that's fine. But in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom link, I think someone suggested that maybe Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom happen at the beginning of the timeline. You know, it's like Skyward Sword happens, maybe Minish Cap or something, and then Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and then Ocarina of Time happens after that. You know, someone suggested that maybe that's what happens, and that could explain some of the things that goes on, if you will. You know, that could explain maybe some inconsistencies or something. I'm not entirely sure there. Obviously that's up to people to kind of like, you know, maybe there's something that can help prove that or disprove that or something, or suggest otherwise or whatnot, you know. So that would be something that's I think is interesting. Now, another thing I wanted to go over, was there anything I wanted to go over? I know there was something else, but I don't know if there was anything else. I don't know. I think I'll go to the next bit then. So Ocarina of Time. Oh, actually, before I do, Minish Cap. So obviously I've called it Minish Cap rather than the Minish Cap, but anyway, like I've always put it at the beginning of the timeline simply because it's the Link hat scenario. I don't know if I still would. I probably wouldn't. But at the same time, I don't know, to be honest, because like you've got those sky people in it, you know, and you've got the Wind Tribe. That's it. You've got the Wind Tribe, and then you've got like what else you got? You've got like you've got the Picori sword, you know, which is like a weird little sword thing, and then it's like, I think the occasional person has suggested that the Picori sword is maybe the same as the Master Sword in some way, something like that. You know, I'm not entirely sure. I know someone suggested that if it is a what if scenario, the whole timeline thing, that it should have been at the end of Adventure Link. Oh well, yeah, Adventure Link. I think that was someone's suggestion, but more importantly, not to dismiss them, of course, but I think the more impressive idea is the Minish Cap, because there is a extra game over screen if you fail at the last stretch before you actually go face Farty. So there's an idea, you know, because you're on a timer before you get up to Farty. If you don't get to Farty within that timer, then you just get a game over, even though you didn't actually die, you know, or get an actual literal game over. So, you know, that's an idea that I thought I'd throw out there and see what people think about that. Okay, so Ocarina of Time, let me go over that. So that's kind of an important game, I think. I mean, no, I don't think. I know it's an important game. But I mean, like, in the time travel shenanigans, now, this is going to probably sound crazy. This is probably one of the craziest things I've done, but I'd love to hear what people think about it, just for the sake of, like, maybe it's an idea, maybe not, I don't know. So, the story of Ocarina of Time, so obviously you start at the beginning, Deku Tree has been cursed, and you go save Deku Tree or whatever. You get the Emerald. You talk to Zelda, she tells you to go get the Gold Ruby and Sword Sapphire. You get them. You go back to Zelda, and she's obviously running off because of Ganondorf. And you go get the Ocarina of Time, and you go to the future, basically. Poor Master Sword goes to the future. Right? And then you go beat the Forest, Fire, and Water temples, bearing in mind that this series of events, I'm talking only plot relevancy in the sense. So obviously, yes, once you beat the Forest Temple, you can go back in time if you wanted to. But I'm talking strictly from a timeline perspective, if you will. So when you look, you know, at the timeline of events, like when you look at like, oh, you know, what's your adventure, what's your objective and whatnot, you're not just Link's obviously not going to go, pull the Master Sword, put it down. Pull the Master Sword, put it down. Pull the Master Sword, put it down. You know what I mean? Because obviously what I'm about to say will sound even more insane if we allowed for that. But the idea then is you beat the Water Temple, right? And once you beat the Water Temple, you then have to go to the Shadow Temple, which I always do the Spirit Temple first personally, but for the sake of plot, Shadow Temple is next. So you have to go do the Shadow Temple. Now you don't have to get the Lens of Truth, but I can't even, you know what, for the life of me, I can't even tell you what your hint is to go to the bottom of the well and whatever. I could not tell you for the life of me what that is, to be completely honest with you. So maybe I'm just spitballing with this idea, but let's just humour the idea for a little bit. So, you beat the Water Temple, and you can't, quote-unquote, go into the Shadow Temple, right? So you go back in time, and you go get the Lens of Truth, right? Now, obviously, how do you get the Lens of Truth? Oh, you need the Song of Storms. How do you get the Song of Storms? You learn it from Guru, I think his name is. How does Guru learn it? He learns it from you. How do you learn it? You learn it from Guru. How does he... You know, it turns into like a bootstrap paradox kind of thing. And, you know, and I think... this is the headcanon-y bit of it, if you will, maybe. But I kind of want to say maybe it can work as well. Is that... maybe... So you've gone back in time. Maybe that's caused like a second timeline, if you will. So timeline A, you beat the Water Temple, and that's it, right? So you can't go back to that timeline A, right? Obviously, gameplay-wise, yeah, it's just one strict timeline, if you will. There's no loss, if you will, for you as a player. But in terms of the plot, that's timeline A, where you only beat the water temple, and now you've gone back, right? So, you know, in timeline A, I'm thinking like maybe a week or so after you disappeared. Obviously, this is going to be obscure. It's going to sound crazy, I think, but maybe someone else played the Song of Storms for Guru, and then he teaches it to you. This is in timeline A. He teaches it to you, saying, "Oh, some kid taught me the song and he really hates it. You know, I really hate the song and whatever." And so that's obviously what he does there. And then you go back in time, now to timeline B, because you're obviously going to you're obviously going to change something. And so now you're teaching Guru the song. And so that's how kind of the bootstrap paradox works. So it's more like a zigzag, if you will, in a sense, if you will. And obviously that week has now passed, so obviously in all other timelines, maybe he doesn't learn it, or does, or something. Actually, no, he would have learned it from you in the other timelines that I'm about to describe. But then what kid would have taught Guru that song? Well, the first typical thought I had, and I think someone else had this thought as well, it would be Skull Kid, right, from Termina, but I don't think that would have worked. I don't think that would have been the case. Not that I don't think that anyone else could have taught him the Song of Storms, but I think just, you know, I think just the fact that it being the Skull Kid could not be the case. So maybe what could have potentially happened is in the land of Termina, they made the Song of Storms like, let's say, 20 years ago, right? 20 years before the events of the game, right? And someone, maybe a Chica or someone, thought, oh hey, let's take this song, let's learn it, and then let's, you know, make a run for it or something. And they make a run to Hyrule and they start a family or whatever, and they have a kid. And that kid is the one that teaches, you know, Guru the Song of Storms in Timeline A. And then, obviously, in Timeline A, he teaches it to you. You go back in time to Timeline B, and now in Timeline B, that kid is still there, but because you beat him to the punch. You know, you teach Guru the Song of Storms, and then, you know, maybe this other kid does teach him as well, but maybe not. And I know it sounds crazy, I know it sounds completely obscure, and I don't have anyone I can really pin this on, but at the same time, I know in Wind Waker, the King of Red Lion said something about there being a pathway to the Earth Temple and Wind Temple while in Hyrule, but no such thing occurs. There is no such pathway in the games. I don't even think there's a hint of a pathway to the Earth and Wind Temple in the Wind Waker, other than this one quote. And it's like, it's one of those things where I feel like it wouldn't have made sense for him to have just randomly said it right at the blue. Right? I don't think he would have just said, oh, by the way, it's a pathway, but you can't take it, so let's take some other route or something. And like I said, there's no hint of it. It's not even the case of like an obscure massive ball that you can't blow up at all. That looks like it might have been blowable, but you can't blow it up so well. You know, so I feel like that might be the case. That could be the case here as well. You can kind of, you know, tease it a little bit, if you will, if that makes sense. I don't know what I'd call this, to be honest. Maybe a path idea. I was thinking about it the other day, and I thought maybe I'd call it the path idea. You know, and I say path idea just for the sake of, like, you know, because it's based on that Wind Waker quote from the King of Red Lion. So maybe I'll call it a corral quote or something, or corral idea. Corral being, you know, a sort of mispronunciation of call, King of Red Lions. You know, so maybe it's a corral idea. You know, maybe I'll call it that. So that happens. So back to the timeline. So timeline B. Now, you learn the Song of Storms, or you teach the Song of Storms to Gugu in timeline B. And you go to the bottom of one, you pick up the Lens of Truth. And then you go back to the future. Now, gameplay wise, they don't want you to have to face off the forest, fire, and water temples all over again. So you just do it, if you will. You know, like you just don't do them because you don't want to repeat or anything. They don't want to force you to repeat them. So, but in timeline B, they're no longer saved, if you will. So Link has got to resave them. So maybe the plot would have Link resave them, but not the player, if you will, if that makes sense, right? So you then go ahead and go to the Shadow Temple, you beat the Shadow Temple, and, you know, you win, right? You win the Shadow Temple. And then you go to the Spirit Temple, and, of course, you can't pass, right? So, just to an idea, by the way, I feel like the Water Temple idea, that the fact that you have to go back at all between these two bits, even if you don't count the Lens of Truth, you can count this bit I'm about to mention as it. That could have been the Gandalf win, if you will, because Gandalf beat Link, quote unquote, or the hero was defeated, if you will, because obviously he can't progress, so he goes back in time to do the Spirit Temple. But yeah, so you go back in time to be able to do the Spirit Temple as young Link, and therefore timeline B has you beat the Shadow Temple, and that's it. You know, you've been the first 4 dungeon, or you've been the forest, fire, water, and Shadow Temples in this timeline, but you go back in time, so you leave that timeline as well. Now, in this case, I would call this the Impa timeline, but I'll get back into that in a moment, because I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So the idea then is obviously you're in timeline C now, so you obviously beat the Spirit Temple. You go forward in time. Well, I say you beat the Spirit Temple. You beat the young Link side of the Spirit Temple. You beat the adult Link side of the Spirit Temple. So you go forward in time, and you beat Twin Rover, and then you go beat Gandalf and Ganon, right? So you've won, and then at the end of the game, Zelda sends Link back, right? And adult Zelda here, continues on timeline C, if you will, as the adult timeline. Whereas you go back to timeline D, you know, to before anything happened, and therefore that causes the young Link timeline. So therefore, to summarise, timeline A has you beat the Water Temple, up to the Water Temple, but you go back in time. Therefore, it's a Gandalf timeline because the least amount of sages have been awakened. Timeline B, you beat the Shadow Temple, and therefore awaken Impa, but you go back in time, so it's the Impa timeline. Timeline C has you beat Ganondorf, and therefore Zelda continues the timeline, so it's the Zelda timeline. And the fourth timeline, you go back in time, and you continue on the young Link side of things, you know, Majora's Mask and all that, and that's the Link timeline. So it's kind of like the Tetraforce timeline, if you will. I think I'll call it that, you know. I think I'll call this general idea that. But yeah, that's kind of the idea, if you will. And I was wondering if like people had any ideas of it, if you will, if you know how like, not like how concrete. I guess how concrete it is, if you will, but like how much you think maybe it could work, maybe it can't, whatever, you know, that kind of stuff. You know. Because, again, at the end of the day, this is just a theory, you know, so at the end of the day, if it's false, it's false, you know, it's whatever, you know, but I think it works. I might just need to get a few more pieces for it, if you will, or maybe a lot more pieces, but I feel like it can work, if you will. You know, I feel like Ocarina of Time could systematically play that way, because you are going back in time and changing the timeline, so... You know, I feel like that could work, or I feel like it's at least an idea, and it gives you it still gives you the 3 pieces to the Triforce, the 3 Triforce timelines, if you will, assuming you don't count the Shadow Temple bit as a timeline, or it gives you an extra one if you do want to count the Shadow Temple bit as one. So, you know, obviously we know what happens in the young Link and the adult Link side of things. And, you know, that being well, I say we know. I feel like Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess, like, well, especially Majora's Mask, that's a given in the young Link side of things. Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks, they're a given in the adult timeline. For the, I should say the Zelda timeline, you know, the Princess Zelda timeline, I should say. The Link timeline, obviously, is the young Link timeline. But I don't know, and I feel like Ganondorf timeline is still pretty much like a Link to the Past and that kind of stuff, you know, something like that. And then, I don't know what I'd put this Impa timeline at the moment, you know. Maybe the Minish Cap, or maybe Breath of the Wild or something, I'm not sure. That's another thing as well, I should point out as well, that I feel like the Four Sword Trilogy should pretty much go close together, at least somewhat. Like, the fact that one of them is completely separate from the other two kind of does not feel, well, not the fact that it's separate, but the fact that one of them is on the timeline branch, whereas the other two aren't. So in the other timelines, the story basically remains unfinished, if you will, technically speaking, of the Four Swords, so it's a little weird. But yeah, that's really all I wanted to go over in this video, really, is for the first Minky Mondays. You know, what's your thoughts on the timeline, if you will? What's your thoughts on this idea, if you will? You know, even if it's not like timeline material, I feel like it's still headcanon material, if you will, because you can kind of like, that's kind of like your own idea, if you will. So you can have fun, have much fun you want with that. But you know, I feel like I wanted to mention this at least to have it said and whatnot, and I figured, you know, this was probably the best way to say it, and then, you know, so if anyone has any ideas they want to add, or if criticisms or anything of it or whatever, then feel free to say in the comments. You know, I'd love to hear. You know, obviously as well, keep everything respectful and whatnot. Don't, you know, between each other as well and whatnot. You know, just, you know, but you know, yeah. But yeah, so yeah, that's going to be it for today. So thank you for watching, and I hope you have a Minky Monday.